Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to St. John's. I'm Pastor Max Lynn. It is an honor and a privilege and a joy to have you and our panelists here today. I will just bring you up to date on a couple of things. There is, the ladies' bathroom is directly out the door. The men's is right around the first pillar. After the event tonight, we have some cookies and hot cider, yum. It's really good. And decaf coffee. You can stop and have a snack and talk to each other. It would be great. I want to thank the Interfaith Power and Light 350.org, Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center, and the Citizens Climate Lobby for helping publicize the night and for being here. We conceived of this a while back, a year or so ago. Ron Amundson is a member of St. John's, a member of our church, and has been so for about 15 years. And we have always kind of noted the basic understanding of Reformed theology, or Presbyterians, being in favor of education. And we've seen all the founding of many universities all across the nation and the world, and for the higher education and for science. And so it's kind of dumbfounding to us that there seems to be a climate of willful blindness, and sometimes especially among people of faith. And it's troubling. It's giving me a bad name. I'm a Christian and believe in God, and I can't believe that I've got fellow brothers and sisters in the church who are being willfully blind. And so we feel called by God to have, we feel like we've been gifted our mind, and that we're supposed to use it to find truth and to do good. And so we want to spread the word. And so it's an honor and a privilege. And I have the Katharine and Dick and Ron on the flyer, and because Ron was a member of the church and I was running out of room on the flyer, I kind of cut him short. But I'm going to ask Ron to come up and introduce our guests and also introduce himself and tell about what the work he's doing in science. And thank you, Ron. Come on up.
Okay, thank you, Max, and good evening, everybody. It's really an exciting moment for us because a year ago when we started to discuss the concept of this evening, Katharine Hayhoe became, oh, louder? Okay, all right. So a year ago when we started this, Katharine Hayhoe immediately rose up on our list as the ideal candidate or person to invite here to be part of this forum. And it took a little while, but fortuitously she was going to be in town this week, so we're delighted that our number one choice is here with us this evening. So I want to introduce Katharine and then Dick and say a few words about myself before we get started. Katharine's a professor in the Public Administration program at Texas Tech University and the director of their climate science program. Her research focuses on high-resolution climate projections to evaluate climate impacts on human society and the environment. She's published a number of peer-reviewed papers and has served as a lead author on reports for the U.S. Global Change Program and the National Academy of Sciences. She's also a lead author on the recently published third U.S. National Climate Assessment. But what sets Professor Hayhoe apart from the rest of her peers is her decision to communicate the dangers of human-induced climate change to the public by simultaneously revealing much about herself, her religious beliefs and how they intersect and inform her concern about the planet. With her husband, Andrew Farley, she wrote a well-received book entitled A Climate for Change, Global Warming Facts for Faith-Based Decisions. And there may be a few copies left in the lobby, so they're sold out, sorry. There's another edition coming out, Katharine? Okay, so wait till the spring. There'll be a new edition available. Her decision to reach out has created a successful path of communication that's now widely recognized. I encourage you to go to her website and look at some of her videos produced by Nova PBS, STEM for Girls, Climate One, Showtime, and the American Geophysical Union. She's garnered numerous awards. This year, she was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. In a citation in the magazine, the Academy Award-nominated actor Don Cheadle wrote, "There's something fascinating about a smart person who defies stereotype. That's what makes my friend Katharine Hayhoe, a Texas Tech climatologist and evangelical Christian, so interesting." And just this week, at the meeting of the American Geophysical Union meeting in San Francisco, the largest earth science meeting in the world, Katharine was a recipient of the Society's prestigious Climate Communication Prize. It's really an honor to have her with us this evening, fresh off a busy week in San Francisco. Thank you, Katharine. Our second panelist is my colleague at UC Berkeley, Dick Norgard. Dick is a professor emeritus in the Energy and Resources group here at Cal and has received degrees in economics from Cal, Oregon State, and the University of Chicago. Dick has had and still continues an impressive career. He became a professor at Cal at the age of 27 in our Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. Early in his career, he helped form an interdisciplinary group called Energy and Resources, which still flourishes today and has some of our most talented graduate students on the Berkeley campus. Dick is one of the founders of the field of ecological economics, and basically it's a branch of economics that views economic transactions as not occurring in a vacuum, but essentially occurring on a planet and looking at the values of the impacts of these transactions on the planet itself. Dick is a fellow of the American Association for Advancement of Science. He's one of the most highly cited economists in the world by other economists, and he's the lead author of the most recent 5th assessment of the International Panel on Climate Change. He serves on an international panel on sustainable resource management of the United Nations Environment Program, and he's the author of an influential book called Development Betrayed, The End of Progress, and a Co-Evolutionary Revisioning of the Future. I would add that in relation to this evening's theme, Dick has taught a graduate course on science and religion. He's a member of a UC Berkeley group called Religion, Politics, and Globalization Program, and he's authored articles and essays on science, ecology, and religion. Dick, thanks for coming this evening. And as for myself, I think I can remember this part. I don't have to read it. I've been at Cal for 30 years. I'm a professor of soil science, and I just finished a 4-year stint as chair of the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management. I study, among other things related to climate, the impact of climate on carbon storage in soil, and then in turn, how processes in soil and human impacts on soil can impact global climate through carbon release. Generally, I'm interested in how humans impact the planet and how we can more sustainably shepherd ourselves through the century and into the 22nd century. And I should add that I've been a member here of St. John's for the last 15 plus years, and so it's a pleasure to be here this evening. So, Max, I believe all of us panelists should come up here, all the panelists should come up here, and what we're going to do is each of us will speak for a period of time about basically why we're here this evening, the interaction or the intersection between our science interests and in climate change and our spiritual and religious backgrounds. And then there'll be a few questions that Max will ask, and then there'll be opportunity for you from the audience to write questions on cards and submit them to the panel. So Dick and Katharine, why don't you come up here and proceed.
Sure. Make sure I have this the right height. There. So I'm a climate scientist. My background is in physics and atmospheric science. Climate science can tell us a lot about climate change, as you might guess from the title. Science can tell us that climate is changing. We know that not just from thermometer and satellite observations, but even just from looking at the trees and birds and bugs and bees in our own backyards. If we look around the world, we see more than 26,500 indicators of a warming planet. That's what science can tell us. Science can also tell us why it's happening. We know that climate has changed in the past due to natural cycles, due to changes in the Earth's orbit, due to receiving more or less energy from the sun, due to volcanic eruptions. We know these have caused climate to change in the past, but science can tell us that if those natural factors were controlling climate right now, we would be getting cooler. And we're not. We're getting warmer. Science can draw the clear connection between all of the coal and gas and natural gas and oil that we're digging out of the ground and burning, and the carbon dioxide that's building up in the atmosphere, trapping much more heat inside our Earth system that would otherwise escape to space. Science can make those connections for us. And science can even tell us, if we continue on our current pathway, what the impacts are going to be, versus if we pick a different pathway in which we transition to clean energy that does not produce carbon, what those impacts will be on our water resources, on our health, on our environment, on sea level, on our cities, on our farms, on all of us. That's what science can do. But that's where science stops. Science can tell us what will happen depending on what choice we make, but science can't tell us what choice to make, because that is a values choice. What one person considers dangerous, another person might consider acceptable. Last week in Lima, Peru, all the countries in the world met together to talk about what is a dangerous level of global warming and what we can do to prevent it. Part of the reason why we've had over 20 such meetings with no resolution yet, although everybody's hoping for one next year in Paris, we've had no resolution yet because dangerous is a value judgment. For 200 Native American villages in Alaska, where the ground under the village is crumbling and falling into the ocean, they would say we've already reached dangerous and we're not even at 1 degree of warming yet. For others, we say, well, 2 degrees is acceptable or 3. Where do these value judgments come from? They come from our hearts. They come from the things that we care about. And so as a climate scientist, I realized that when I was talking to people about climate, I was missing a huge chunk of what matters. I was talking all from my head without talking from my heart. So for me, I realized that I had to talk about climate change not just as a scientist, but as a person. And as a person, what's most important to me is my faith. As a Christian, we know that we're told to love others as Christ loved us. We're told to love our neighbor as ourselves. We're told to care for the poor and the weak and the disadvantaged and those who don't have the resources that we do. And when we look at how climate change will affect us, those most affected are those who do not have the resources to adapt, both right here at home as well as on the other side of the world. So for me, the reason why I care about climate change and the reason why I'm here tonight is because of my faith. It's central to caring about this issue. Thank you.
I'm an economist, but only an economist by training, not by conviction. And that's an important distinction. 400 or 500 years ago, we had philosophy. Philosophy broke into natural philosophy and moral philosophy, and I'm proud to say that I come out of the moral philosophy branch of philosophy. From natural philosophy, we eventually got the natural sciences, and for moral philosophy, we have ethics, but we also have the social sciences. But we have economics in particular. And the economists have been brought into society to make the value judgments that we should be making ourselves. Economists come forth and say, well, let's do the efficient thing. What's best? We've been asked to do that ever since 1936 and the Flood Control Act that said water agencies need to do benefit cost analyses to find out which water project's best. And economists then rose to power in the Cold War, in the fight with the socialism, and with the development projects of the World Bank. And the influence of economists just kept growing because we left the job to the economists of saying what we ought to do. In fact, economics really needs to go back to the moral philosophy. We have to realize Adam Smith was a moral philosopher, that Thomas Malthus was a parson. Many of the early economists in the United States were educated in theology. And because they were asking the basic questions of what's important in life and how do we get the important things. But then it became a discipline and tried to imitate physics and try to claim that it was value-free while it was in fact making value decisions. The position of economists are that they can look at society and see what people want by the choices they make and what is reflected in prices, and if markets aren't working correctly, then infer how markets would work if air pollution were included in the market, if you had to pay for clean air, or if you had to pay for clean water, or if you had to pay, or we paid others to see that we had this. This system of valuing that economists use is too important to be left to economists. And within economics itself, we know that economics needs a value system beyond economics. There's a particular theory called general equilibrium theory that shows that you can have an efficient economy with rich and poor, or you can have an efficient economy with nearly equal incomes. They can both be efficient. And all economists can talk about is efficiency, but not whether we should have relative equality or great inequality. The major problem with economics for actually talking about climate change is that future generations are not in our markets. And this is an issue of future generations. And if you value future generations, then you have to somehow modify the economics we have practiced, because this is a really different situation. So economics needs to be brought in because inequity is really important, and that's a serious problem today. And we need to be stepping in and saying we need to solve the problems of inequity, but inequity between generations is equally important. Economics has become somewhat of a religion of its own. If we didn't believe markets were going to work, if we didn't believe there was going to be food in the Safeway or in Dronico's or the Berkeley Bowl, we would not go to work and start planting potatoes in our lawns. Some of us only have flower pots, and it wouldn't work out very well. So we have to believe in this market system. But if you think further about it, everything around us has really been transformed totally by the environment and by the economy. We live in an economic world. It's not a very natural world anymore. It's a transformed world. From 1950 to now, the world economy has grown by a factor of 10. Population by 2.5. It's a little different. So we need, as people of faith, to ask, is the economy doing the right thing? Because the economy is driving the problem of climate change, and you can't leave it to the economists to deal with it, because their theory actually can't deal with it. We need to make the decision ourselves. I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, Dick and I are professors at Berkeley, a public institution, and we're both from the same college, or we were, the College of Natural Resources, which is part of the land-grant origins of the University of California. And we have a mission to do research for the public good. And so, in that sense, it's easy and natural for me to be able to weave into my daily activities the ethical system that I've accumulated over my life, starting as a young boy on a farm in South Dakota. So it's an easy way for me to bring in the background of the community here at St. John's and elsewhere into the work that I do. Okay. When I was in high school, I took a class in agriculture, which started me on the track I guess I'm on right now to being a professor here at Cal. I took a class in ag, and we started to learn about the effects of soil erosion and the long-term impacts it would have on farm productivity and its impacts to society. And also about that time, I started to become really aware that modern farming that I was part of relied heavily on fossil fuels, and the looming shortages and the finite resources of availability of these resources on Earth sort of struck me at an early age as a problem that we would have to confront in my lifetime. And so here I am 40-some years later. Soil erosion still hasn't stopped, and next year the United Nations has actually designated 2015 to be the International Year of Soils. They've already kicked off a number of events in New York related to this, but I think you'll hear a lot more about this over the next year. The real sustainability of society to produce food hinges on how we treat the planet and how we treat the soil and maintain it. And certainly the fossil fuel side of things is really the reason we're here tonight. Not only is there a finite reservoir of these resources, we're burning them faster than the atmosphere can handle them, and there's a serious set of consequences associated with it. I think my spiritual background has, in addition to influencing or affecting my research, is part of my writing and teaching. It took me some time to feel comfortable to bring biblical analogies and allegories into the classroom, but I found they sort of resonate with my students in the sense that it allows us to look back at sort of human conditions and activities that have been going on for thousands of years and provide a unique way to accentuate and look differently at the things that I've been trying to bring in the classroom. And finally, I think maybe like a lot of scientists, it's one of the things that makes me excited about to go to work each day and to be involved in my projects is kind of an awe or a feeling of that the Earth and the cosmos is part of a bigger picture, that there's sort of a transcendental quality to all this, and a magical quality that is difficult to perceive, but it's beautiful and gratifying to be able to perceive parts of it in my own career and my own research and to understand it. And I think that is, I think that's where I'll end right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one day we were having a Sunday school class here at St. John's, and one of the students was in class with Ron's son and looked over at him and said, "Your father is a scientist. How in the world can he believe in God?" And so I just want to ask you all to reflect on your spirituality. How is it as scientists that you can believe in God, and how does your spirituality inform your work or even call you to do your work as scientists in whichever way that you have been affected? Tell us how it affects your work.
same order. I often get asked if I believe in global warming. And I think it shocks people when I say no, I don't. I don't believe in global warming. I look at all of the facts and the information, and I draw what appears to be the most logically supported conclusion. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is in Hebrews. It says that faith is the evidence of things not seen. Science is the exact opposite. Science is the evidence of things seen. And if you Google the definitions of faith and science, they're shockingly similar to Hebrews. So many people perceive faith and science to be in conflict, but I think that they are beautiful complements to each other. Science, by definition, is bounded by what we can observe. Science is bounded to this universe. There are plenty of theories, scientific theories, as to what might exist outside this universe, but we cannot observe anything outside this universe. And everything we observe occurs in the 3 dimensions of space or the 1 dimension of time. Faith, on the other hand, is the evidence of what we do not see and we do not observe with our eyes. Faith is that awe that you have when you stand in God's creation and you just think, this is amazing. Faith is what supports us when we're going through trials in our lives and we think, why is this happening and how can I even wake up and get out of bed the next morning? Faith is what gives us hope that there's more to our lives than just this physical, observable universe. And faith, I think, even provides an explanation, although not one supportable by fact, as to why anything even exists at all. So even though these 2 things are often in conflict, I really feel like as a climate scientist, when I observe the Earth is so beautifully and wonderfully made that when we figure out or discover or stumble upon this new amazing mechanism by which the Earth keeps itself in balance or ensures that clouds are there when they are needed or that the ocean circulation moves the nutrients to where they need to go, I feel almost as if I'm discovering what God was thinking when he set it up in the first place. And God's thinking, finally, somebody appreciates what I did. Isn't that nice? And then, as I mentioned before, I think that the faith becomes even more important because we have to recognize the limits of science. With what I said before about how science can tell us we have a problem, science can tell us why we have a problem, science can tell us what are our options to address the problem, but science can't tell us how to fix the problem. And I have not just heard people of faith say this, I have heard many scientists say this. So I would say not only do I believe that faith and science are not in conflict, but I further believe that we need faith to make these tough choices that Dick referred to, where it isn't just the dollar signs that we need to make the decisions based on. We need to make the decisions based on what is right, not just what is convenient.
Katharine has this down a little better than I do.
That's the first time I've said that stuff. It really is.
Well, this will be the first time, too. I guess by every definition I've known, I probably don't believe in God. And yet, I have faith, and it must come from somewhere. I did grow up in the First Congregational Church here in Berkeley, and that's a step above Unitarian Universalism. But not a very big step. It was probably too easy to drift away from. But at the same time, I drifted into the canyons of the Colorado River in Utah as a river guide, but also just as a wanderer, and had incredible moments of peace and oneness. I've had these moments on peaks or on the way up to peaks and let others go to the top, and I'll just stop and rest here, thank you. I've had these moments in the Amazon. where things are just all together. Now there's stress of trying to figure out what's going on just leaves me. And and then I get startled back into reality, and there's chaos. But these moments are so important to me. They still drive me, and I guess they're moments of realization of a sort that give me faith. I think as an economist, I know we need moral communities beyond economics, that we need to pass morality from generation to generation, and the churches do that. Not always, particular moralities that I might choose in a particular church, but they are doing it a lot better than the scientists are, and a lot better than the economists are. And I respect that and work with that, and so I'm pleased to be here.
Well, if this is Katharine's first time saying it, now I feel inadequate.
No, okay.
But,
It's my 10th.
But I guess probably the intersection between faith and what I do, I became cognizant or aware of it over time. I think what struck me and still strikes is a wonderful book is Thoreau's Walden, which opened my eyes to sort of a vision of nature as sort of maybe a thin wall behind a number of other wonders that lie behind it, and maybe a metaphor for bigger concepts and ideas than just what you can see and put your fingers on. I think putting faith more directly into my work and teaching and feeling comfortable with that connection. One evening struck me, I was at the Berkeley Rep Theater, and I was looking at the program, and on the side there were a number of sort of random quotations, and one was from the book of Matthew. It was Jesus saying, "Therefore I speak to them in parables, for they seeing see not." And I was working on a paper that time on the history of an important scientific ecological theory, and I was writing about that. And I realized that theories are really the parables of science, and I started to feel comfortable with bringing the analogies and metaphors from biblical sources into not only my thought process, because they enrich it and enliven it, but also I think they provide ways to connect with people that are outside the scientific community, which I think will be one of the topics that we're going to discuss more later this evening. Finding ways to speak differently about what I do and make it and provide and put it out in a way that connects with people outside of science is I think an important part of bringing this into my work.
So we're going to pass out some cards that you can write on. I've got a couple more questions, but you can write questions, and we'll take a few of them as well. I'm going to just switch. I think with all the things that are going on in the world, with poverty and racial prejudice and all of the issues, war, why should we care about climate change, and why should we want to do something about it?
That's a tough one to ask at a time like this, when we're all very conscious of the many challenges that face us. And sometimes climate change might seem trivial in the face of the more immediate issues. I think one of the most pervasive and insidious myths associated with climate change, among both people who agree that it's real and people who do not, is that climate change is a distant issue. That it's distant in space. It only matters to the polar bears, or maybe to people living on low-lying islands in the South Pacific. Or it's distant in time. It doesn't matter to our generation. It matters to the next or the one after. So because of that perception of distance, we often put climate change on the back burner compared to other issues that are more immediate, right here in front of our eyes. Here's the thing, though. First of all, climate change is no longer distant in space or time. There was a fingerprint of human-induced climate change in the California drought. It doesn't get any closer to home than that. It's happening now, and it's happening here. We are seeing stronger droughts around the world as a result of climate change. We're also seeing heavier rain events at the same time as a result of climate change, not to mention rising sea levels, stronger hurricanes and heat waves, and changes in average conditions. Even though we might see it here, though, then we still say, okay, well, we have these priority lists of all these things we care about. We care about poverty. We care about racial injustice. We care about our children. We care about making sure we have enough to provide for ourselves or for our parents or our kids. We have all these things on our list we care about. So yes, I care about climate change, but I'm going to be really honest, it's number 7 on the list. Here's the thing I'm going to propose. This is my proposition for argument. I'm going to propose that climate change should not be on our list of priorities as individuals or as a state or a nation. I think climate change is separate. It is an issue that affects all the things on our list of priorities that we already care about. We care about climate change because it affects our water. We care about it because it affects our health. We care about it because it affects the economy, because it affects national security. As a study showed that I went to see this week, we even care about it because it affects rates of violence and murder. Our environment affects us in profound ways, and when that climate changes, our human infrastructure and society is unsuited for rapid change. As John Holdren, the President's science advisor, said, he said, at this point, we're facing 3 choices. We can prepare for a very different future. We can reduce our emissions substantially, or we can suffer. Not a word you hear scientists saying a lot. He said, we are going to do some of each. But the more we reduce our emissions, the less we're going to have to prepare and the less suffering there will be. So why are we talking about climate change? We're talking about climate change because we care about racial injustice, because climate change exacerbates the divides in our society that already exist. We care about climate change because of economic issues, because there are enormous costs associated with its impacts. We care about it because we love our kids, and climate change affects our kids and their future and their health. So we care about it not because it's a separate issue on our list of priorities, but because it affects everything that's already on our lists. Do you agree or not?
I'm going to have a little trouble saying this, but the progressive religions, progressive Christianity, but progressive religions in general in the 19th century sort of made peace with science, and it was a peace which was a absolution, I guess, of responsibility. And we sort of said, well, science can do its thing, technologies can unfold, the economy can grow, all this stuff, and we can carry on our religion, and religion becomes more of a personal thing than a where's society going thing. And that truce needs to be repaired. We need to take responsibility for the technologies that we have out there. Those were choices that individual scientists sort of went from science into technology, not knowing the full impacts on the environment or the full impacts on society. And we as people of faith need to step in a collective way that we haven't really stepped in. And so it's not just climate change. It's how we do agriculture. It's it's pretty much everything. It's the society we're creating with information technologies. we really need to step in and say, what kind of a world do we want to have? And we haven't done that. For 150 years, we've kind of let the world unfold.
I just finished teaching a class called the Biosphere at Cal, and in my last lecture, I mentioned to my class that the planet and the home that we live on is non-denominational, nonpartisan, and it's not an issue that should involve really that much controversy. It's really the very basis for all the human drama that plays out on it, but it has no political affiliation or religious affiliation. And then to sort of drive the point home, I show, as I do in a lot of my classes, the late Carl Sagan's little speech called The Pale Blue Dot, where he talks about how he turned, I think it was the Sojourner spacecraft on the planet Earth after it was way out beyond the solar system, and the Earth appeared just as a tiny speck of light in space. And I think that's a perspective that we begin and end that class with, my co-teacher, my co-instructor and I, to look at the Earth from outside. The wonders of the NASA space program has probably the most valuable thing in some ways has been the ability to take us beyond, outside of our interactions in our home and look at how isolated we are and emphasize that there's really no other place for us to go. This is, as Carl Sagan would say, this is where we make our stand. And how we treat it and how we care for it will greatly impact my son and the people that follow him. A few years ago, well, it was more than a decade ago, just before Stephen Jay Gould died, he came here to Cal to give a lecture, and a public lecture, and he gave a little quote from one of his essays called The Golden Rule, a Proper Scale for Our Environmental Crisis. And I want to just read that for you. I've never been much attracted to the Kantian categorical imperative in searching for an ethic, to moral laws that are absolute and unconditional and do not involve any ulterior motive or end. The world is too complex and sloppy for such uncompromising attitudes. And God help us if we embrace the wrong principle and then fight wars, kill and maim in our absolute certainty. I prefer the messier hypothetical imperatives that invoke desire, negotiation, and reciprocity. I imagine that our various societies grope towards this principle because structural stability and basic decency necessary for tolerable life demand such a maxim called the Golden Rule. I suggest that we execute such a pact with our planet. She holds all the cards and has immense power over us. So such a compact, if we desperately need, but she does not at her own time scale, would be a blessing for us and an indulgence for her. Poor Richard told us that necessity never made a good bargain, but the earth is kinder than human agents in the art of the deal. She will uphold her end, and we must now go and do likewise.
So now to get a little bit critical of faith communities and people, what are the underlying social forces behind the resistance to science in some faith communities, in particular climate science?
When you survey the American public and you ask people whether they think climate is changing and whether humans are responsible, and then you collect the results and you divide them out by faith tradition, there's a very clear gradient. The more conservative the Christian church you attend, the less likely you are to think human-induced climate change is real. So because of this correlation, people automatically assume that there's a causation, that there must be something about conservative Christian faith that makes us doubt climate change. But a number of studies have shown that when we control for political affiliation, the correlation drops out. When you look at climate change, there is nothing in the Bible that says that climate change couldn't be happening or that it isn't serious. The Bible contains many passages expressing God's love for creation, as well as more dire passages that talk about God destroying those who destroy the earth. That's in Revelation. So there's no theological reason per se why people would oppose climate change. In fact, studies have shown that the best predictor of any individual's opinion about climate change is the opinion of the thought leader who they respect. So what we've been doing, I believe that we've been confusing our faith with our politics. We've been listening to people telling us things, in some cases couching it in faith-based language. I'll give you just one example. Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma is a well-known denier of climate change. He often couches his denial in religious terms. He has said things like, there is no pastor who thinks that climate change is real. I would love to introduce him to several pastors that do. He has many times said things like, God couldn't let this happen, or using other language like that. But 2 years ago, he was interviewed by Rachel Maddow, and he said something very extraordinary. He said, I used to believe in this global warming until I found out how much it cost. And in fact, a study just came out of Duke last month that showed that the number one reason why people don't agree with climate change is not because they don't like the science, it's because they don't like the solutions. But here's the problem. It's a lot easier to say it isn't a real problem than to say it is a real problem, but I don't want to do anything about it. So that's why we have such rampant denial, is because if you look at the thought leaders in our society, especially the thought leaders we hear about often in the media, the ones who share the most conservative values are the ones saying it's not real. But they're not doing it because of religious or faith-based reasons, they're doing it because of ideological-based reasons. In fact, until recently, most of the social science on climate change would have an axis from Republican to Democrat. So Republican, independent, Democrat. And then usually opinion on climate change went low, medium to high. Well, nowadays, this week at the conference I just went to, rather than using political affiliation as the x-axis on our plots on opinion about climate change, people are now using the level of support for free market ideology. That is one of the best predictors of whether people think climate change is real or not. Which leads perfectly into.
Well, yeah, I didn't expect that to pop up that way, but Katharine clearly knows more about this than I do. She's from Texas, I'm from Berkeley. I don't, I spend too much time in, an independent nation. It is hard. And so I can only, let me speak for my daughter, who's an environmental sociologist at the University of Oregon, who studied climate denial in Norway. And Norwegians are very close to their environment. And she just discovered that they weren't talking about climate change. They would sort of get just so far and then the conversation would stop. And it was because they couldn't imagine, to get real just to the nugget of her thesis, they couldn't imagine a Norway without snow. And they just couldn't think about it. And Norway would be, certainly vulnerable. It's already experienced some winters that have been not snowless, but the snow arrived extremely late and was light. But I think for all of us, it's very difficult to really think this through. And it's easier just to not talk about it.
Well, I think the problem is a two-way street. One between, the problem lies with scientists themselves, and also there's problems with the people we're trying to reach. I'll be kind of blunt, I guess. Scientists in general are poor communicators. Some of them, we had a nice conversation this evening, are rather abrasive and dismissive of people outside of their belief system, particularly people of religious beliefs. Some of them just have very tenuous connections with modern society and modern culture, so they lack the ability to reach out. I'll be honest. So scientists have I would say a dismal record of reaching out to the public. They need people in between to step in and communicate these things to the public. So that's one problem. I became interested in this problem about 10 years ago, and it was before the study. There's some wonderful books that Katharine is referring to that have come out recently, summarizing this for the popular audience, why we believe what we believe. But before these books and this research came out, I was starting to notice people that had tremendous success in communicating science and other related things to the most unlikely audiences. And the first person was Professor John Houghton, a climate scientist from Great Britain, who in the early 2000s reached out to the evangelical church community in the United States. But the thing that he did first, rather than talk about climate science, he met with them, talked about their shared value system, integrated himself through that, and then began talking about climate. And through that deliberate and actually a lot of hard work to connect with people, he was one of the first success stories I ran across of somebody that was able to communicate science to non-scientists of a group of people that people might not necessarily expect to be receptive to it. Another person who was a genius at this is our former governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's put a nice positive spin on this. Solving climate is not only a good thing to do ethically, but you can make money at it. That's an important thing. You have to reach capitalists. Scientists don't want to reach out to people in that area as effectively as they should. Finally, the person I use in all my classes as an effective communicator is the rock star Bono, who through just, I guess, his natural instincts, went in and convinced the Bush administration and the most unlikely group of people in Congress to support AIDS relief for Africa and a number of other humanitarian efforts in Africa. And if you ever watch Bono on the Huckabee show or something, I mean, they love him. And I started to dig deeply into why that happens. And it gets down to, finally they get to on these interviews, they get to, why are you doing this, Bono? And he says, I'm doing it because I feel a moral and religious obligation to do this. It's written in the scriptures that we should do this. And by doing that, he does it very instinctively. He's able to make, as Chris Mooney, a science writer who wrote a book about this, talks about, it's before you start presenting your message, you have to connect and find common ground with the people you're trying to communicate with. And it's a challenging and difficult issue that a lot of us aren't very effective with. But some people have the natural ability, and they're sort of the examples and templates for sort of a new way, I think, that's emerging, and Katharine's part of this, to communicate effectively with people outside of the science community.
What can people in faith communities do? How should we act?
As Ron referred to, as scientists, we usually aren't very comfortable talking about how we should act. We can tell you what the problem is, it's up to you to fix it. But we aren't just scientists, we're humans. And we're not just humans, but in many cases we're people of faith. So as a Christian, I believe the Bible tells us that faith expressing itself through love is what we are called to do. The beauty of that is there's such freedom in it. There isn't a list of 10 commandments that thou shalt do in this case. For some of us, the way our faith expresses itself through love might be something simple, like going into the homes of people who we know can't reach their light bulbs and changing them for them. It may be something a little more complex, feeling called to tell our elected officials that we care about this issue, and if we're going to vote for them, they need to be standing up for what is right and what's true. Or for others, it might be working with relief and development organizations who are working with people on the other side of the world, or even right here at home, again, who are already disadvantaged and already struggling and who are just feeling even more so as food becomes scarce, as water becomes less available, and as disease spreads. But the question is always, what can we individually do? That's the question, isn't it? And again, there's no 10 commandments of what we should do. But I think that first of all, as individuals, the first thing to do if we're going to lose weight is, which I'm sure nobody here ever needs to do. If somebody is going to lose weight, what I do is I step on the scales because I want to know how much I weigh and therefore how much I can lose. So in the same way, step on the carbon scales. Measure our carbon footprint. I always ask my grad students as the final exercise in my climate class to measure their carbon footprint. And then I ask them, what did you think? Every single one this year, without exception, was surprised by their carbon footprint. Their carbon footprints ranged from a very conservative 11,000 tons, or pounds, I should say, to about 25,000, which is even below the national average. So we can measure our carbon footprint, but we can go further. We as communities, in our churches, in our schools, in our universities, in our businesses, we can make decisions to conserve energy and to help climate too at the same time, and to help people. And it's really interesting because people say, well, you know, something stupid as changing a light bulb, what difference does it make? Well, in aggregate, it makes a big difference. If every household in the US changed one light bulb, that would be like taking almost 1 million cars off the road. But the biggest change that occurs when we change a light bulb is in our heads. Studies have shown that if we just do something, it gets us excited and we want to do more. We feel like we've done something, we're successful. You know, otherwise you feel like you're kind of paralyzed and frozen. So I don't know how faith expressing itself through love on this issue is going to look in any individual person here. But that's the beauty of it, is it doesn't have to look all the same. We each have the freedom to do what we feel called to do. And when we do that, I think the results can be incredible. So I should come back next year and see what we have done. I don't know.
I almost feel like passing on this question. I mean, I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to get my own profession into shape, but that's hard. You can, yeah, there's just so many things we can do, but it may be time that, you know, we need to cross political boundaries and get into some serious discussions. You know, I don't want to repeat a march in Alabama or something. It's not Selma, but we do need to cross barriers and say this is what we stand for and we want to make this change. And we have a difficult period ahead of us politically, but I think we just have to make our voices heard very strongly. Adopt a scientist and help a scientist become more interdisciplinary. A lot of the problem is inside our own community. Help a scientist speak out. You know, do this in your living room. There's just lots of ways to help out. Thank you.
I'd like to almost want to pass too, but I'll say that one thing that that I'm drawn to is a recent series of articles, you might have seen it in the newspaper, about environmental fatigue, the constant dreary message of impending doom that leads even the most dedicated people to despair and hopelessness in the face of the problem. And I think I struggle with this as a teacher at Cal because I don't want to leave a bunch of 18 or 20-year-old students feeling that the best is over and the future that they're going to face is one of environmental catastrophe. So I think it's important to look at this. It's the best of times and worst of times, and try to, as Governor Schwarzenegger did, at least put a smile on it and make it seem like a tractable problem. And the other thing I think is important, and I refer to a Berkeley resident, Annie Leonard, who has the website Story of Stuff. She says we need to flex our citizen muscle, which means that we need to vote for people and support people that not just reflect or maintain their political party strength in Congress, but actually represent us and represent things that we're concerned about. I know it's something that in Berkeley is something most people are doing anyway, but I think it's not, as I mentioned, this is not a political problem, it's not a denominational problem. It's one that we can get beyond if we just get people that will provide that leadership at a national level.
What kind of reception do you get when you speak with Christian fundamentalists?
When I go to speak with people, I never go uninvited. People often say, well, can't you just go talk to so-and-so, or can't you just go talk to this group? And my answer is no, not unless I'm invited. There has to be somebody to try to block the flying tomatoes. I don't go unless I have a human shield. Might just be one person. Because I feel like pounding on closed doors is not going to achieve much. That door has to be cracked. But you would be surprised how many doors are cracked. Not open, but cracked. So when I go talk to people, I've discovered as a scientist, very strangely, I don't talk about science first, and I don't even talk about it second. The first thing I do when I go talk to people is, or talk with people, I should say, is I start with what it is that I care about that they do too. If I'm talking to a Christian college, I start with almost a statement of faith or a declaration of belief. If I'm speaking to a group of Texas farmers or ranchers, I start talking about water, because we all care about water. If I'm talking to a group of women, I often talk about our kids, because most of us have kids and we would do anything for them. So first I talk about what we have in common that we care about. And then I say, and here's why I care about climate change. I care about it because it will make our water even more scarce. I care about it because it affects my child's future. I care about it because I believe God created this earth, gave it to us to take care of, and told us to love our neighbors who live on it and are affected by our actions. Then, only third do I get into, and here is what climate change is, and here are the impacts. And then fourth, I believe it's important to provide solutions and encouragement and really inspiration about what we can do, because studies have shown also that we can talk all we want about a problem, but if we do not offer solutions to that problem at the same time, people are far less likely to actually agree that there is a problem. And there are inspiring solutions. I mean, in Texas, you probably didn't know, but this past spring, we smashed the records for the most wind energy ever generated. We generated, I think, a maximum of 38% of our electricity from wind in Texas. Yeah. That's a success story, and we can feel good about it. It's like, changing the light bulb changes what's in your head. Hearing that we are already doing this changes what's in our head. We're like, yes, we can do it. So I think inspirational stories, who doesn't want a house with solar shingles on the roof and solar paint on the walls so we get our own energy and we're independent? We all would want that if it was available at Lowe's or Home Depot. And then talking about bigger issues like becoming energy independent and having better national security and growing our own energy in the places where we live. So when we talk about it in these ways, and in the science section that's buried there in the middle, addressing some of the common myths that people have heard, like, I've heard global warming stopped, or I've heard that those ice caps aren't melting anymore, or I've heard it's just a natural cycle. Addressing those don't change people's minds, but addressing those crack the door open just a little bit farther. But it's the connecting to the values that really matters. And so when I connect to people's values, the worst response I've gotten is, well, I had a lot of reasons why I didn't think that global warming was true, and you addressed all those reasons, so I'm gonna have to think of some new ones. That's the worst I've gotten.
So, Dick, how can economists learn to or start including costs such as human costs, water loss, and drought, and other things?
We're actually pretty good at putting values on things that are not in the market, on the value of human life, of all things, $6 million. Yeah, seems silly to say it even. The value of clean air, what people are willing to pay for this, what people would be willing to pay for that. The problem is the techniques that we use to get these values are drawn from the existing economy. And when the existing economy is on the wrong track, then the values you come up with are incorrect also. It's sort of like perfecting something that's going the wrong direction. And we need to worry about that overall thing. In theory, we can contemplate what the world would look like and how we could transition, but we're really talking about transitions. While most of economics is about a system that's equilibrating all the time. It's not really about how do you make a system transition. So we need to train economists differently and for them to help them realize the limits of their own approaches, but to get them open to other approaches.
So Ron, is it true that no-till, no chemical farming has the same or better crop yields as modern mechanized farming?
No-till, no chemical farming.
Right.
So my colleagues at Cal just released a report, I believe this last week, doing a survey of all the published reports or papers that have been peer-reviewed papers, and they came to the conclusion, I haven't read their article yet, that there's only a minor difference in the long term between productivity of no-till, non-fertilized, basically organic agriculture productivity versus conventional agriculture. So I would say that that is probably true.
Close enough.
Close enough.
Go ahead.
No, we just had it close enough to the true.
I felt like this was Jeopardy, and we should be waiting for the true or false reveal. $500.
What about, just talk a little bit more about the just kind of confused faith and the possibility of values for people who are not believers. And how can atheists or people with no faith talk to Christians who are being knuckleheaded?
In the question is part of the answer. Calling someone knuckleheaded never fixed anything.
That was me. That was not on the card. Sorry.
I think that, so I mentioned earlier how I think one of the most pervasive and insidious myths about climate change is the idea that climate change is distant and far off in space and time. But I think another, probably number 2 insidious myth is that climate change requires a certain set of values. In other words, you can't care about climate change unless you are green, tree-hugging, liberal, possibly even atheist, to care about the environment. I think that just about every single human on this planet already has the values they need to care about climate change. They may be different values from each other, but we have the values. So, for example, we're humans. Unless you have signed up for the trip to Mars, this is the only planet we have. If you did sign up for the trip to Mars, you want to be able to come back, I assume. So it's in our best interest if we own a house not to let that house fall into disrepair, right? You want your house to be clean, you want it to be habitable, you want it to be pleasant. This earth is our home. We want it to be clean, habitable, and pleasant. You can go further though. You can look at, again, we talked about the faith perspective. You can even look at the Department of Defense's perspective from national security. Climate change is bad for national security. It leads to instability that the US is then called on to help out with, and that costs American lives. You can look at the economy, at energy independence. You can look at health and pollution. You can look at even whether you're a sports person, whether you're a hunter or a fisher or a birder, if you're a skier or a snowboarder. There's many ways that climate change affects us, and again, I think just about every person on this planet already has the values they need. We just need to figure out what those values are. We don't need to go around instilling green tree hugger values into every person on this planet because it won't work.
Though we love green tree hugger people,
Absolutely.
and we have many in this room.
I would hug a lot of trees, but there aren't a lot of trees in Texas. So whenever I see that one tree, I do hug it, and I say, thank you for being here, tree.
So Ron, how does climate change affect the soil? I mean, we hear about weather and stuff, but what's it do to the soil?
Well, I think one of the Katharine sort of gave a nice introduction to the problems of climate change, but there are many serious issues that lie ahead this century that a lot of us here, Katharine and folks at Berkeley and myself, are working on, which is, as the planet is warming, as Katharine said, if you lived in Alaska or if you were an Inuit, you would know this because the northern latitudes are warming faster than the equatorial regions. You would see the world change before your eyes. One of those changes is the melting of the tundra of the north. And the soils there somebody used a wonderful analogy. It's like you had a freezer full of vegetables and you pulled the plug on the freezer. What do you think is going to happen? Well, it's going to rot, and it's going to give off CO2, it's going to give off methane. And in science, it's called a positive feedback. The warmer the world gets, the more of those soils melt and rot and give off carbon dioxide and methane, which in turn ramps up the climate. And the amounts of potential greenhouse gases that can be released like this are just simply enormous. They swamp out all of the fossil fuel that we're burning in terms of the potential magnitude of release. So the issues are really serious about climate change. Katharine said that it's a value system. Do we want 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees? Each of these will in turn have spin-off effects this century that we're only being able to get a handle on and predict in terms of what will happen. So it isn't just we stop fossil fuel burning and everything will be okay, because the planet is responding to what we've already done and will respond over decades or centuries, and it'll be hundreds of years before the final things will slow down from the impact that we're imparting on it right now. Soil is really one of the future of where we will be at the end of the century hinges on how much carbon the plants of the world will take up through photosynthesis versus how much will be lost from the soils. And we don't even know the sign of that reaction right now, and it's a real serious problem.
Dick, studying macroeconomics in the 60s, growth was required because investment is required to offset savings, which reduce the income streams. I understand John Stuart Mill and maybe others have described a steady state economics. How would this work? How would it avoid the requirements above?
So there is this almost, it's faith, it's transcendence in economics, is growth. It's how we get closer to something. Well, I don't, but this is, yeah, this is part of our problem, is that economics isn't really about, I mean, it's assumed a lot of the language of religion, and growth is transcendence. Having more and more is being better and better. We do have models that show that the economy does need to keep growing. Those models can be replaced with other models that are different. It's just a model. But we have models that show up in textbooks, and then economists begin to believe it, and then the public begins to believe it. The Marxists say, look, even the neoclassical economists say the economy has to grow. Capitalists have to have more and more and more. They're just models. Most of human history, the economy has gone up and down very, very slowly. Well, not always slowly. And, you know, the economy can be different. Now, we're going to have to learn how to manage it to be different. I'm not saying that we can just turn down the processes that are in place now and have everything work out fine. But it is not the case that a capitalist economy has to grow. And, you know, hopefully we'll go towards a mixed economy. But either way, it doesn't have to grow. So we do have societies for steady state economics. And I've worked with Herman Daly, who wrote a book on steady state economics. We have a few economists who have been meeting for the last half dozen years that are degrowth economists, largely arguing that in the rich nations, we've grown beyond a happy situation. Happiness doesn't come with more stuff. And, you know, what are we doing with all these warehouses in which we store our stuff in? Why do we? So I remodeled part of our house, and I now have a bunch of stuff in a warehouse, and I don't need it back. It's, you know, we've overgrown. We have technologies that get in our way of caring for each other, communicating with each other, loving each other, and we can reconfigure this society to be a happier place and still have an economy that supports it. But I'll have to confess that the profession of economics is not helping us at all. And we need to, you know, we need some good engineers just to produce those other models that say, well, this model is just as good as your model. They're both just models. But here's how we have to get there.
Is there anything that we can do to save the planet, or are we too late?
I have to say that is one of the most frequent questions that I get these days. It is, yes. Not just from, you know, regular people, but from reporters. Especially because we see these conference of parties that just happened in Lima last week. We see them happening again and again and again. At some point we figure, is it just like figuring out which side of the sinking boat to jump off of? Except there is nowhere to go. The research I do specifically focuses on this issue. And the situation is this. There's no magic number of cigarettes that you smoke in order to guarantee, you know, 10,000 cigarettes and you will get lung cancer, but 9,999 and you won't, right? So in the same way with carbon emissions, we know that X amount of carbon emissions will produce 1 degree of warming, right? Y degree of carbon emissions will produce 2 degrees of warming. And Z, I'm Canadian, Z amount of emissions will produce 3 degrees of warming. So is it too late to avoid 1 degree? Yes. We have produced enough carbon such that we will warm by 1 degree unless we invent a way to suck the carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back underground. And people are working on that. Is it too late to avoid 2? No, it's not too late. But we only have this much more carbon we can produce to stay below 2. So it's kind of like, as a student, if you ever did that envelope thing way back in the day, where you put all your month's money in an envelope, and that was what you had to live off of. And if you ate steak dinners for the first week, or dim sum, or something equally expensive, then you were on ramen noodles for the rest of the month. You know? So in the same way, we don't have that much more carbon till 2 degrees. We can still do it, but it's slim pickings. So we haven't passed 2 yet. Now, people often cite 2 degrees as the target. Why is 2 degrees the target? Is 1.9 good and 2.1 is catastrophe? No, there's no magicness to 2. It's because people are trying to decide what's dangerous. And again, if you go up and talk to Native Americans in Alaska, they'll say it's already dangerous. If you go talk to people living on Tuvalu or the Maldives, they'll say it's already dangerous. So they don't think 2 degrees is dangerous, they think 1.5 was dangerous. But if you talk to other people in terms of the net economic damages that ensue, in terms of the impacts to crop yields, in terms of the ecosystems or the species that are threatened, studies tend to converge roughly around 2 degrees as kind of an acceptable balance between losses and costs. But again, depending on where you look, it could be lower or higher. So is it too late? No, it's not too late. And even if we pass 2 degrees, it's still not too late because it's not a step function. It's a continuous curve. For many situations, including drought, crop yields, human health, energy demand, sea level rise, it's a continuous curve. The further we go down the curve, the higher the risk, yes, but there's always the potential to prevent more. So I don't know if that helps. It's easier to just say, here's the answer, right? And I kind of said there is no answer.
And I want to chime in on that because globally you're absolutely right. The problem is who gets to emit that additional amount before we're in trouble. We need to get on some sort of path where we emit and then reduce our emissions. But the majority of the people in the world are much poorer than we are. And the reasons we have not had a climate accord, the reasons we're at the committee, or the COP, Committee of Parties? Conference of Parties, number 20, is not because there's debate over the sciences, but there's debate over who is responsible and who should cut back the most. And this is another great big moral dilemma that we in the rich nations would just soon not talk about, while the poor nations are kicking and screaming and saying, you rich guys caused the problem, you've got to solve the problem. And if there's technologies that allow us to develop without emitting greenhouse gases, we'll use them, but you did it, you've done it to us, and it's your problem. I mean, obviously we're all going to suffer together, but the issue of the responsibility, at least from the position of the South, is that it's our responsibility.
Talk about the influence of corporate interest on the resistance to responding to climate change.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember the author of, this is just a problem of being 71 and having a meningioma that I haven't quite gotten rid of. There's clear evidence that just as in the cigarette controversy days, where there was incredible evidence that cigarette smoking does cause cancer, there was this counter movement, and that was funded by the cigarette industries. And we're in the same place today with climate change. There's been tremendous expenditures by those whose interests are going to be severely damaged by the transition away from fossil fuels to fund counter messages and get deeply engaged in politics. And the Koch brothers are a clear example of this. But yes, most of the big oil companies, most of the coal companies are understandably loath to want this change to occur. And it's in their interest to dispense misinformation. It's, you know, this is not the Enlightenment times when you have people deliberately promoting misinformation, and even people with PhDs deliberately promoting misinformation. But we have this going on.
Now I know what book that was.
Yes.
I think you're referring to a book called Merchants of Doubt.
Thank you.
By Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. Merchants of Doubt has been made into a movie by Robbie Kenner, who did Food Inc. That movie, I hate to tell you this, an advanced screening aired last night downtown at the Metreon, but Sony's releasing it in March. And I haven't even seen the whole thing, but it is about these people who sow this doubt and did so for the tobacco companies and are doing so now against climate change. And so what Robbie did was he took his camera and he went to their homes. And he said, talk. Tell me why you do this. And they did tell him why they did this. So it is really, the clips at least I've seen, I didn't get to go to the screening either, but the clips I saw were really remarkable. So I'd encourage you to go see Merchants of Doubt when it comes out in March and take your friends and neighbors with them.
Yes.
With you.
Thank you for filling me in.
I just saw her last night, so that was why it was fresh in memory.
I would have been there too, but 3 out of my 4 children have birthdays on December 18th.
So Matt,
I'm going to resist the temptation to count backwards on that one.
so Max, I'll just tell a brief, only at Berkeley story about this. But on the other side, corporations, some corporations, of course, really see that they can make a profit, they can make money, they can make a living in this new world. Less than 2 years ago, I walked out of my office one day at lunchtime. A young student, Cal student, was there with a sign saying, "Excellent advice, $1." So I gave him $1 and walked away, and he said, "Well, aren't you going to take your free advice?" And I said, "Well, are you a Cal student?" He said, "Yeah, a business student." I said, "Okay, tell me my free advice." And he said, buy Tesla stock. It's incredibly undervalued." I looked back, and the day he told me Tesla stock was under $15 per share, a week later it was over 100, and it stayed there. So it just goes to show you can, in the corporate world, it's a profitable thing to do something the right way and to look ahead to the next generation of problems.
Can I hire that student to manage my portfolio?
So we kind of assumed that a lot of people that walked in today would have some of the background on the facts behind, the scientific facts behind climate science, but maybe we should cover a few. What are the 3 or 4 top indicators of climate change? And then to a reference that you, from what you said, how does climate change impact violence in our society?
Okay. A great resource on the science of climate change is the U.S. National Climate Assessment. Version 3 was released just this past May, and it's very readable. The problem with the IPCC reports is, to be frank, they're not very readable. Although, except for the part he wrote. So the National Climate Assessment has a frequently asked questions appendix. It has a climate science primer or primer, depending on what part of the country you come from. And it has a figure that are the 10 top indicators of a warming climate. So often we hear about global temperature, which is the 2-meter air temperature, just because people are about 2 meters tall. But I think the best indicator of a warming planet is the heat content of the planet, which includes the ocean, the atmosphere, the land surface, and the ice, or the cryosphere. Because when we look at air temperature, it's literally the tip of the iceberg of global warming. The ocean is absorbing 20 times more heat than the atmosphere. So I look at the heat content of the planet, and then we look at things we can see. Snow is melting weeks earlier in the year in the Sierra Nevadas and in the Rockies than it used to. Sea level is rising. Heavy rainfall is getting much more frequent. Hurricanes are getting stronger. The humidity of the atmosphere is increasing because as it gets warmer, more water evaporates into the atmosphere. So, and then, like I said, there's 26,500 physical indicators of a warming planet, many of them in our own backyard. When I first moved to Texas, my colleague in biology, who co-directs the Climate Science Center with me, had a peach tree in his backyard. He's been there at Texas Tech for 30 years, and being a biologist, he kept track of when that peach tree flowered every year. That peach tree was then flowering 2 to 3 weeks earlier in the year than it had when he first moved to Lubbock because spring was arriving earlier. Unfortunately, he had to cut the peach tree down, but we're seeing the same changes in the cherry trees in Washington, D.C., as well as in Kyoto, Japan, where they've kept records of when those trees flowered for over 1,100 years. So I would refer anybody who wants more information on the science of climate change to the U.S. National Climate Assessment, especially if you have any questions, to the frequently asked questions section.
As an artist, I know how much I care about my work I have created. Can you imagine how God might feel seeing us humans trashing her creation? If God might be sad, angry, upset, why aren't we?
Is there an answer to that?
I think that's a perfect question. Let's leave it let it be.
Kind of a statement. So I wonder if do you have questions for each other before we finish up? Do you have anything you'd like to ask each other?
Ron, why haven't we done this before?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that myself. You know, today when I was going over some of my thoughts for this evening, I realized that going through this exercise, like teaching a class, as you all know, is probably more beneficial to the teacher than it is to the student. It gives us a perspective and generates new ideas of things that one can do next. I think one thing I was thinking of, Katharine mentioned, and again, I would refer to the books by Chris Mooney and articles by Chris Mooney as an insight into why all of us think what we do and believe what we do. And in order to reach groups that are resistant to knowledge, I think it's important to reach out to the leaders of their social and cultural group that they're part of and help them, give them the information and make connections to them so that they can make it comfortable for people that are part of their community to accept these ideas and not feel resistant to them or feel that they're threatening their social and cultural values that they cherish. So one of the things I was thinking I can do is work through the professional scientific organizations that I'm part of to reach out to faith communities and other communities that have been, and the leaders of those groups, and invite joint discussions and sharing of information that can be probably the most effective way to rapidly advance what we know to other groups more effectively through the people that they trust and feel comfortable with. And I think that's one of the things I've realized from this. We haven't done it before. I haven't been forced to actually sit down and think about this before, but it's been an interesting evening and given me a lot to think about and aspire to.
Well, having Katharine with us has helped a whole lot, but
Yes.
But we have people in the community here who could almost, no, not quite, but maybe if we had a couple of people.
I'm working on cloning. No, I would say your question was the perfect one, because why haven't we done this before? Because I just feel like the depth of the conversation and the thoughts here have really kind of amplified at least my own perspective, as well as I hope everybody's here.
Well, thank you all. So now I'm going to ask our some of the sponsoring organizations to come up. Just tell us what you're up to, what we can do to help, and within, like, briefly.
Yeah.
2-3 minutes. Interfaith Power and Light.
Hi, my name is Will Scott. I am the new program director of California Interfaith Power and Light. I began there about 7 months ago after a couple of years in ministry and church work. And I want to say that IPL National has 40 state affiliates, and California is the first one of those affiliates. And California, as many of you may know, has one of the strongest laws in the country dealing with carbon pollution, AB 32. And as you also may know, the oil and gas industry has spent millions of dollars trying to undermine that law and weaken it. And so one of the strongest things that California IPL is trying to do is to make sure that the faith communities that are in our network, all 640, and those who want to join our work, are giving that voice of the faith community, the moral voice, to Sacramento legislators to do more, to strengthen AB 32, to ensure that some of the revenue, which is to go over $1 billion, is made sure to go to the strongest hit communities faced with rising sea levels, air pollution. We have congregations all over the state, in Stockton, Fresno, Modesto, as well as in Los Angeles and San Diego and in the Bay Area, which is, of course, one of our strongest areas. And so I just want to invite you to be aware of our work, to check out both the national IPL website and the California website. We have some action items there, and there's materials in the back of the room if you'd like to see more about that. But I have a brother who's a Methodist pastor in West Virginia in the coal country, and he's doing his part to try to build those kinds of relationships across the divide. And I think we have those here in California as well. They can be geographical, they can be issue specific, oh, I'm only on this issue, not this issue. But we're here to say, as Katharine so eloquently said, this isn't just one issue to care about. It is the issue of our time that collectively we need to address. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Deborah Sylvie of 350 Bay Area. We often get confused with 350.org because we are very inspired by that national organization and we work closely with them, but we're a local organization. We have flyers out there that some of you already have, and we have many campaigns. We hope you'll join us. Our campaigns are varied, but we are focusing on helping to create a path forward toward clean energy and renewable energy, and we are also fighting the forces that don't want that. So we know that we have to have that, and we can have that path, but we have to make it happen. I'm facilitating the divestment campaign locally here, and the divestment campaign is one way to clear that path, because by divesting or uninvesting from the fossil fuel industry, from coal, oil, and gas, we can invest in the clean energy that we know we have to have. There's an international divestment movement now, as you probably know, that is making big progress. And so we're having divestment from pension funds internationally, and from universities and colleges and churches. And my colleague here, Pat Kinney, is going to talk about the Presbyterian Church and that campaign to urge Presbyterians to divest. Pat.
I'm a member of the Cool Planet group of First Presbyterian Palo Alto, and we feel that faith groups have a moral and theological mandate to speak out about climate change, because we're called to be stewards of creation and to care for the least of these. We've tried slowing climate change through individual lifestyle changes, but that has not been enough. So then we joined a grassroots movement called Fossil Free PCUSA. For General Assembly in June of 14, we wrote an overture asking our denomination to begin divestment from fossil fuels. 12 presbyteries across the country passed that overture, including your own San Francisco Presbytery. Our overture was referred for study until GA 2016, and we plan to be there again. Meanwhile, educating Presbyterians across the country about the importance of divestment. So if you're a Presbyterian who cares about climate justice, please join us in our work. I have brochures about the campaign and would love to talk with you afterwards.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Selkirk. I'm one of the group leaders for the Alameda County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. And we are honored to have on our National Advisory Board Dr. Hayhoe, Jim Hansen, and also former Secretary of the Treasury, George Schultz. We are a nonpartisan citizen lobbying group, now upwards of 11,000 volunteers across the country. We have a sole focus, which is to lobby our Congress to pass a fully rebated tax on carbon, a national tax on carbon, which economists from all over the political spectrums will tell you is absolutely the most efficient way to reduce our carbon emissions and stabilize our planet. So we welcome you to learn more about CCL. We have active chapter here. Those of us in the Bay Area have been working hard also to help start new chapters in more conservative parts of the state, and we have been successful in establishing new chapters in Stockton, in Modesto, in Nevada City, all over Northern California. And we meet regularly here in Berkeley. If you want to get more information, we have sign-up sheets outside, and we'd be very happy to talk with any of you who are interested in joining us. And I want to say that since I started working with CCL, I'm inspired and hopeful in a way that I have never been before. I've also lobbied congressmen for the first time in my life and have learned that exactly what our panelists have said, that when we can speak with common heart and common values, we're going to stabilize our planet. I have no doubt. So thank you.
Claire from Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center. We are organizing with the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, trying to work in that area of the state, and we've got several organizations working with us, including Interfaith Power and Light, and what were the other ones? The Citizens Climate Lobby?
Citizens Climate Lobby of Contra Costa County is also working on the planning committee. We have the Social Justice Alliance and Temple Isaiah, and basically we're trying to have a day that will reach out to lay and pastoral leadership. It's really a faith call to action on climate, connecting the dots, where we're really trying to see if we can get the conversation going more in Contra Costa County. So if anyone here from Contra Costa County wants to play in this pond, we would love to have you work with us on this.
Thank you.
So just a word on the issue of poverty and environment. When I got my first church, I worked in Houston, and it was in the poor part of town, and I was a minority, and when we lived near oil refineries, and if there was a disaster at the refinery, it was the poor people of color that lived in that neighborhood who were hurt. When the Richmond refinery exploded, it's the poor people who are hurt. My family, part of my family, my wife's family lives in Guatemala, runs on rain agriculture. They can no longer afford to run on rain agriculture because it's not raining enough. The deforestation plus climate change has made such a difference. Also, the increased storms are washing away their land, literally washing away the farm. So they don't even have a land to farm, which makes them poor, which means they want to come up to the United States illegally or be forced to do some kind of way to earn a living that we may not like. So those are just some comments that I'm holding in my heart. And Psalm 19 says, "The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And Psalm 148, praise him, sun, moon, praise him, all you shining stars. Praise him, you highest heavens, and you waters above the heavens. Let them praise the name of the Lord. May the blessings of the Spirit of all life that gives you breath, that unites us together, that makes us a part of this wild and wonderful creation, be with you and fill you with inspiration to go out and do good things. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.